So imagine you are running a marathon, but there's a pretty serious catch here. A really heavy, thick fog has rolled in.
Oh, that sounds awful.
Right. You can't see the finish line. You can't even see those little markers on the side of the road that tell you how many miles you've gone.
You're just totally blind to your own progress.
Exactly. You're sweating, your legs are burning, you're putting in this massive amount of physical effort. But because that fog is so dense, I mean, for all you know, you're literally just running in place.
Yeah, that is a fast track to giving up.
Which is the question, right? Like, how long do you think your brain will actually allow you to keep running before it just forces you to down on the pavement?
Honestly, not long at all.
Yeah.
Because evolutionarily speaking, the human brain is just this incredibly greedy organ when it comes to energy.
Right.
It consumes, I think, about 20% of our daily calories. So if it doesn't perceive a really clear return on investment...
Like if it can't see the finish line?
Exactly. If it can't see that the energy it's spending is actually moving you forward, it pulls the emergency brake. It just outright refuses to keep spending that energy.
And that biological emergency brake, that is exactly what it feels like when you're tackling a massive long-term goal and your motivation just entirely vanishes.
You hit the wall.
You hit the wall, you're putting in the hours, you're doing the drills, but the fog is too thick and you just want to quit. So, today we are doing a deep dive into that specific phenomenon.
How to sustain motivation when you're trying to master something huge.
Yes. And our source material today is really great. It comes from Emma at English. Specifically, we're looking at her insights on how to stay motivated when learning a new language.
But I think it's important to note that these aren't just, one educator's ivory tower theories.
Not at all.
These strategies actually came out of a collective brainstorming session with this huge community of adult language learners.
Right, the Hey Lady community.
Yeah, it's an online platform where intermediate and advanced women meet to practice English. So what we're looking at today are battle-tested insights from actual adults who hit that wall in the fog and, well, had to figure out how to climb over it.
And the core mission of our deep dive today is to unpack the 4 very specific scenarios where motivation dies.
Feeling stuck, feeling bored, getting overwhelmed by real life, and trying to return after a long hiatus.
We want to pull out the underlying psychological mechanisms for each of those. That way you can apply them to whatever you are doing, whether that's learning English or, trying to learn Python for a career pivot or even writing a novel.
What's fascinating here is the fundamental framing. The source doesn't treat motivation as this mysterious personality trait or a weather pattern that just blows in and out of your life.
It's not magic.
No, it frames motivation as a mechanical system. And like any engine, it needs active maintenance, it needs troubleshooting, and it requires very specific fuel.
So let's look at the first place that engine usually breaks down, which is the illusion of stagnation.
Oh, this is a big one.
This is when you are putting in the time, you're doing the flashcards, you're reading the textbooks, but you feel like you are going absolutely nowhere.
Right.
Right.
And this is where we really have to draw a sharp line between our subjective feelings and objective reality.
Because feelings lie to us.
Pretty much. When you're pursuing a long-term goal, your day-to-day progress is practically microscopic. So if you rely on your feelings to gauge your momentum, you will always feel like you're failing.
You have to transition from feeling like you aren't making progress to actually looking at hard data.
Exactly.
And the source's solution for gathering that data is keeping a progress diary. Now, I have to admit, my initial reaction to this was pretty resistant.
Yeah, I get that.
Because if someone is already exhausted by studying, if they're already burning out, telling them to write a diary just sounds like giving them extra homework.
Right.
To go back to our marathon metaphor, it feels a bit like telling someone who is tired of running that, hey, you should start jogging with a clipboard.
Which sounds terrible.
Yeah.
But the resistance makes total sense until you look at the neurology of why documenting your progress actually works.
Okay, lay it on me.
It isn't extra homework. It's actually the required mechanism to close a dopamine feedback loop.
Ah, dopamine, the motivation chemical.
Exactly. The progress diary, they suggest, tracks 3 very specific things. The action you took, the success you achieved, and the areas that still need work.
Okay.
When you write down a small win, your brain releases this little microdose of dopamine. And without that written proof, your brain stays in that energy conservation mode, constantly asking, what's the point?
So it lifts the fog just enough for the brain to say, okay, keep running.
Right.
The source actually gives a highly granular example of a diary entry that makes this a bit more concrete. It's not just a generic, I studied today.
Because that's too vague.
Yeah. The student notes that they practiced the second conditional, which, for anyone who hasn't taken a grammar class recently, is when you talk about hypothetical situations.
Like if I won the lottery, I would buy a boat.
Exactly. So the student wrote out sentences using that structure, sent them to a tutor, and then met with a speaking partner to discuss what they would do if they met the Dalai Lama.
See, the specificity of the action is what makes it measurable. Studied English is just fog. Use the second conditional to discuss meeting the Dalai Lama is a tangible data point.
And then the diary splits into successes and struggles.
Which is crucial.
For successes, the student wrote, I feel much more comfortable using contractions when I speak, and I write the second conditional perfectly. But under struggles, they noted, when I'm speaking out loud, I still hesitate and overthink the structure.
By splitting those two things up, you completely change how your brain frames the whole learning process.
How so?
Well, you stop walking away from the desk with this vague, heavy feeling of I'm bad at this language. Instead, you're creating a targeted diagnostic tool.
Oh, I see.
You prove to yourself that the fog has lifted around using contractions. You own that win. And the hesitation with the hypothetical structure, that isn't a failure anymore. It's just the coordinates for your next study session.
You're forcing the invisible progress to become visible so the brain doesn't pull the brake.
Exactly.
But, okay, let's play devil's advocate for a second. Say you've got your progress diary, you look at the data, you can physically see you're getting better, but you still absolutely dread sitting down at your desk to do the work.
So visibility isn't the issue.
Right. If visibility isn't the problem, that implies there's a flaw in the actual destination you're heading toward.
Which brings us to the psychology of your why.
Yes.
We're shifting from how you track your work to the deeper reason you're doing it in the first place. Because when you inevitably hit a slump, the only thing that will pull you through is a motivator deeply tied to your identity or human connection or maybe a major life transition.
The source draws this really brilliant contrast here between weak and strong motivators. A weak reason, they point out, is something like, I want to be able to speak with native speakers.
Yeah, that lacks emotional stakes. It's just an abstract concept rather than a lived reality.
It's like, okay, having a goal like talking to native speakers is basically like buying a very expensive, custom-tailored tuxedo when you haven't even been invited to a party yet.
That is a great analogy.
You have this complex tool, but you have no real-world application driving you to actually put it on, so it just hangs in the closet.
Right. The tuxedo needs a specific social context to be useful, and so does a new skill. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the source highlights that a strong reason has immediate high-stakes context.
Like what?
Like getting a master's degree abroad, or creating new career opportunities to literally change your family's financial trajectory. Or, and this was heavily emphasized by the community, it's about integration.
Right, living in the country.
Yes. It's living in a new country and wanting the agency to speak directly to your children's teachers, to mingle with other parents at a birthday party, or to actually become friends with your neighbors.
It's identity, recognition, friendship, and if you are bored, the source stresses that you have to escape the artificial environment of the classroom. You have to force the skill to intersect with things you already care about.
Because a sterile classroom environment just strips all the context away.
Yeah.
If you want to sustain motivation, you have to take control of your learning environment and weave this skill into your existing hobbies.
They suggest finding spaces where people share your interests. Like, if you love gaming, you put on the headset and you coordinate with your teammates online in English.
Yeah, or you join cooking forums.
You argue about movies on Reddit. The source even specifically mentions making memes on platforms like Instagram or Twitter.
You know, using memes as a study tool is actually a fascinating stress test for fluency.
Really? Memes?
Oh, absolutely. Humor is arguably the hardest cultural barrier to cross. It requires this deep understanding of nuance and slang and shared cultural context.
So you're testing your vocabulary and your cultural fluency at the exact same time. And you get immediate real-world feedback in the form of likes and comments.
Exactly.
Which is exactly what the Hey Lady community does for its members. It acts as a vehicle for these women to connect over their actual passions, discussing real life rather than just reciting textbook dialogues about, I don't know, ordering a cup of coffee.
Right. And when the skill becomes the vehicle for enjoying your hobby, you aren't really practicing anymore.
What are you doing then?
You're just living. The language becomes the byproduct of the connection, rather than the chore itself.
Okay, so you're making memes, you're tracking your progress in a diary, everything is clicking, and then real life happens.
Yes, it always does.
You get a terrible flu. Your boss hands you this massive, chaotic project. Your family needs you. Suddenly, your priorities are forcibly shifted, and this massive goal you've been working on just has to take a back seat.
Yeah. The inevitable interruption.
Yeah.
And how we handle this interruption usually dictates whether we ever finish the goal at all.
I can actually speak to this personally. A few years ago, I was intensely trying to learn the guitar.
Okay.
And work just got crazy. So I told myself I was going to take a short break for the weekend just to catch up on sleep. I put the guitar in its case.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. That short break accidentally lasted 3 years.
Wow.
I just never picked it back up. And honestly, for the first 6 months, I carried this low-grade silent guilt about it every single time I looked at the case in the corner of my room.
That guilt is exactly what the source addresses with their concept of the timed break.
A timed break.
Right. Taking a back seat because of life stress is totally necessary. But an open-ended break, like your weekend guitar hiatus, is incredibly dangerous to your motivation.
Because it just drags on?
Because without a definitive deadline, a break mutates into endless procrastination. So the source outlines a very specific protocol to prevent this. You decide on the length of the break. Maybe it's a few days, 2 weeks, maybe a whole month.
Okay.
And then you physically write the return date down in your calendar.
And there's an accountability step here too, right? You tell someone else your plan. You set the intention out loud.
Exactly. And the psychological mechanism at play here is cognitive load management.
Meaning what?
By giving the break a strict boundary, you establish a contract with yourself. You tell your brain, okay, we will resume on the 15th. And that shuts off that background guilt you mentioned.
Because guilt drains energy.
Yes. It drains the exact executive function and energy you're supposedly trying to recover during your rest period. Setting a date gives you explicit permission to actually heal and rest.
So wait, what does this actually mean in practice? Is this like hitting pause on a movie instead of just turning off the TV and walking out of the room? Like you need to know exactly when you're sitting back down on the couch.
That's a great way to look at it. You're pausing it, but you know you're coming back. Because if you don't set a date, you spend the whole break agonizing, thinking, oh, I really should be studying right now. You aren't resting. You're just chronically stressed about not working.
Makes total sense. And the source also highlights that during this timed break, you should engage in what they call unofficial engagement.
Or passive immersion.
So you aren't doing formal study. No grammar textbooks, no progress diaries. But you listen to music, or maybe put on a podcast or watch a movie in the target language.
Right. You keep the skill in your orbit passively. Active studying requires high executive function and intense focus.
Which you don't have if you're sick or stressed.
Exactly. Passive listening does not require that. It keeps those neural pathways slightly stimulated so they don't completely atrophy, which means the eventual return isn't a total shock to your system.
Which brings us to the moment of truth. The timer has gone off.
The day has arrived.
The date in your calendar is here. You've survived the work crisis. You've recovered from the flu. You sit down at your desk to restart. You open your book, and you realize you have complete and total amnesia.
Yes. The square one fallacy.
It is so incredibly demoralizing to feel like all the hard work you did before the break has just vanished into thin air.
It really is.
And look, if you are listening to this deep dive, you are likely a highly motivated person. You're a high achiever. And if you're a high achiever, you want to jump right back to the cutting edge of what you were doing.
Of course.
So how do we restart without hitting a brick wall of frustration and just losing all our motivation right there on the first day back?
We have to dismantle that feeling of being at square one using a little bit of basic neuroscience.
Okay.
The source is absolutely adamant about this.
Yeah.
You are never back at square one.
Never.
Never. The knowledge is not gone. It's better to think of those neural pathways like a trail in the woods that you haven't walked in a year.
Oh, I like this.
The path is still there beneath the soil, but it's overgrown with weeds and brush. You do not have to rebuild the trail from scratch. You just need to walk it a few times to clear the brush.
Okay, so how do we clear the brush without exhausting ourselves and giving up? The source provides a very concrete, albeit challenging, prescription here.
Very challenging.
You start by doing revision of your old coursework. You test yourself on what you remember, but you only do it for 10 to 20 minutes a day. And here is the challenging part. Well, the source says you need to expect this recovery period to take around 1 full month.
Yep.
Wait, really? A whole month of daily short practice just to return to your pre-break baseline before you even attempt to learn anything new?
I know. I know that for a high achiever, the idea of spending 30 days just reviewing old material probably makes your skin crawl.
It sounds agonizing.
Yeah.
I mean, if I've finally carved out the time to get back to my goal, dedicating a tenth of a year just to get back to where I already was, feels like wasted time. I want to move forward.
It feels counterintuitive, sure, but it is biologically necessary. When you learn a skill, your brain wraps those neural pathways in an insulating layer called a myelin sheath, which allows the signals to fire rapidly.
Okay.
When you take a break, that insulation thins out. So if you try to immediately pick up right where you left off at the highest level of difficulty, the signals literally can't fire fast enough.
Because the cognitive load is too high.
Exactly. You crash, you get incredibly frustrated because you know you should know this,
Yeah.
but you just can't access it.
And that frustration leads to immediate burnout.
Right. And you end up quitting again.
Yeah.
You need that 30-day runway of low-stakes, 20-minute sessions to re-thicken the myelin. And as you do, you start having those little aha moments where the knowledge clicks back into place.
Like, oh, I remember this word.
Yes. That realization of, oh, I do remember this, is a massive dopamine hit that actually rebuilds your motivation from the ground up.
So it's treating self-compassion not just as this, feel-good sentiment, but as a hard tactical tool. You use that month to knock the rust off, protect your confidence, and only then do you start taking on new territory.
It's an incredibly robust system.
It really is. So let's pull all these threads together because the roadmap we've extracted from Emma and the community is essentially a complete diagnostic manual for long-term learning.
Absolutely.
First, if you feel stuck and stagnant, you transition from subjective feelings to hard data. You use a progress diary to map your actions, your successes, and your struggles, creating the visible proof your brain needs to keep funding the energy.
Second, if you're bored, you interrogate your destination. You abandon those vague goals and anchor your efforts to identity and deep connection.
Find your party for the tuxedo.
Exactly. You escape the artificial classroom by blending the skill with your genuine hobbies, turning practice into real-world communication.
Third, when life forces an interruption, you don't just quietly fade away in guilt. You take a strategic, timed break. You set a calendar date, you tell a friend, eliminate the cognitive load of guilt, and use passive immersion to keep the neural pathways warm.
And finally, when you return to the desk, you reject the square one fallacy. You accept that the trail in the woods is just a bit overgrown, and you give yourself a biologically necessary 30-day runway of short revisions to clear the brush before trying to sprint again.
And while this deep dive was grounded in language learning, the psychology here is totally universal.
Oh, completely.
You can map this exact system onto learning to code, or training for a half marathon, mastering a new software suite, or writing a thesis. The brain's mechanisms for managing energy, dopamine, and cognitive load, they remain the exact same no matter what road you happen to be running on.
The fog affects us all equally.
Which brings us right back to that initial image, running the marathon in the heavy fog. We spend so much time and energy beating ourselves up when we want to stop running.
We really do.
We call ourselves lazy or undisciplined. But what if losing your motivation isn't a failure at all?
That's a great question.
What if a lack of motivation is actually a highly evolved, highly effective diagnostic alarm, like your brain's way of flashing a warning light on the dashboard? It's telling you that your current strategy is either too vague, too boring, or just poorly timed. So instead of fighting that alarm or forcing yourself to run blindly into the fog until you collapse, what if you just stopped and listened to what the alarm is trying to tell you?